In this Blender tutorial, I'll show you how to create these 3 different procedural ceramic materials. And if you'd like to purchase these materials to use in your projects, you can get them with the links in the description on my Gumroad store and Patreon page, or you can watch the tutorial and learn how to create them yourself. So after we create each different procedural material, I'll be showing you how to join them together into these custom node groups so you can customize the material. So the first one here is this smooth ceramic. So I decided to add it onto a teapot just because that looks pretty nice. It's a good object to preview the material. So for this one, we have the base color of the material. Then we also have the roughness of the material. Then we also have this glaze, which is kind of like a painted glaze. It's that clear coat, which is kind of painted over that ceramic. And then we also have the clear coat roughness. Then there is a bit of a noise here, so you can see if I turn up the bump strength, there is noise, but I wanted to keep it very, very subtle because I wanted this to be a smooth ceramic. So you have the noise scale and the noise detail and also the noise roughness, but if you turn up the bump strength, you can kind of see them better. So I have it turned to a very small number, but there are some noise settings if you want to play around with that. So the next material is a speckled ceramic, and so I thought it'd be cool to add this on to a ceramic bowl. So I just modeled this simple bowl object and added that material to it. So for this one, we have the overall scale of the material. Then we also have 2 speckles scale, and then we also have the ceramic color, which is the main color. And then we also have this worn color, which is just kind of like those little edges. So it kind of has a worn secondary color. And then we also have the speckles color. Then we have the speckles visibility, so you can make them stronger or you can make them less visible. Then we also have this glaze, which is that clear coat. It's kind of like a glaze which is painted on the bowl, and then also the glaze roughness, and then also the bump strength. And then for the last one here, this is a textured ceramic. So I thought this one would be cool to add to like a ceramic vase, like maybe a flower vase or something. So for this one, we have the overall scale of the material. Then we also just have the roughness. And then we have 3 different colors. So we kind of have a bluish greenish color. Then color 2, this is just like a dark green color. And then we also have color 3, which is a brown color. But you can of course change it to whatever you want. Then we have the glaze to kind of add that shininess on the surface, and the glaze roughness, and then also the bump strength. So if you'd like to purchase these materials, you can get them with the links in the description on my Gumroad store and Patreon page. And if you'd like to purchase all of my materials, definitely check out my Ultimate Blender Procedural Material Pack. And you can learn how to create more procedural materials by checking out my Blender Procedural Material Tutorial playlist here on YouTube. All the links are in the description. So real quick, I'll show you what I have set up in the 3D viewport if you want to set up the blend file the same way that I have. So I added these 3 different objects to preview the materials on. So for this teapot, I clicked on Edit and I went to the Preferences. And then on the Add-ons tab, you can search for Extra and you can enable the Add Mesh Extra Objects add-on. And once that add-on is enabled, if you go to the Add menu, you can go here to Mesh, and then you can go down here to Extras, and you can add the Teapot Plus. So then I scaled this object down by like a 0.1, and then I press Ctrl A and I applied the scale, and then you can press Ctrl 2 to add a subdivision surface, and then just shade the object smooth. So that's it for the teapot. Now as for this bowl here, this was pretty easy to model. I basically just added a circle and I filled the face, and then I just extruded this bowl up and then kind of extruded it down to make the inside of it. And then I added a subdivision surface modifier and shaded it smooth. And then for this vase here, this was also pretty simple. So I just started out with a sphere and I selected the top part and kind of extruded it up and deleted the top face. And then I added a solidify modifier to give it some thickness. And then also I gave it a subsurf modifier to smooth it out. And then you can see right down here on the bottom, I just selected the bottom vertices and extruded them down and added a little bit of a bevel there to that edge. Then I just added a camera and just pointed the camera at the objects. And if you select the camera and you click right over here to go to the object data properties, I set the focal length of the camera just to 80, just to kind of zoom the camera in a bit. Now for the lighting, I went here to the world properties and I added in this Machine Shop 02 1K HDRI from polyhaven.com. If you want to download the same HDRI, I will have the link in the description. And I downloaded the 1K version and the HDR version. And then to add in the HDRI, once you download it, you can click on the yellow dot here next to color. You can click on environment texture and then just click on the open button and open up the downloaded HDRI. Let's also go up here to the render properties, and down here on the color management, I'm going to be using the view transform of Filmic, and I made the look to very high contrast. And then also if you open up the film tab here, if you want to, you can checkmark the transparent button, and that way in the rendered view, the background is transparent so you can't see the HDRI in the background. So I'm in the shading workspace, so I have the 3D viewport right over here, and I'm just going to go into the rendered viewport mode, and then I have the shader editor right here. So I'll select the first object, let's click on new to add a new material, and I'll just rename this material to smooth ceramic. And then I'm also going to be using the Node Wrangler add-on in the video to preview the different nodes. So if you don't have the Node Wrangler enabled, you can click on Edit, you can go to the Preferences, and then here on the Add-ons tab, you can search for Node and just enable the Node Wrangler add-on, and I'll show you how to use it in the video. So what I first want to do is add a node, which is going to have like some darker areas in the creases and crevices and lighter areas on the outside. So to do this, we're going to search for the geometry node, and we can hold down the Control and Shift key and preview the geometry node if we hold down the Control and Shift key and then select it. And I'm going to continue to click on it while the Control and Shift key is held down until I'm previewing the pointiness value. Now the pointiness value doesn't work in Blender Eevee, it'll only work in cycles. So if you're using Blender Eevee, this won't work and it'll just be one solid color. But what it's going to do is it's going to make kind of the creases and crevices darker, and then the parts on the outside are going to be a bit lighter. Now, if you are using Blender Eevee, then you could search for the ambient occlusion node instead, and the ambient occlusion node is going to do a pretty similar thing, so you could use that instead. But I'm going to be previewing the pointiness value on the geometry. So I want to be able to preview it better because it's really gray right now. So I'm going to search for a color ramp, and we'll drop the color ramp here after the geometry. So now I'm going to drag the white tab over and then drag the black tab over, and I'm actually going to have the white tab over here on this side and then the black tab over here on this side. So now you can see that it's kind of like black here and then lighter there and black there because I switched it. So now you can see that adds a really cool effect. So now I want to create the custom color. So to do this, I'm going to search for a mix color, and we'll put this after the color ramp, and the color is going to go into color A, and we're going to take the mix type here and we're going to set it to darken. And then the factor, we're going to turn all the way up to 1. So this way, we're just going to have one custom color that we can make for whatever color we want, and the other color is just going to be fully black. So I'm going to make this kind of like a bright red color, and if you want to use the same color I'm using, you can click on color B and go to the hex value, and you can punch in FF0300. So now I can put this result into the base color. Let's drag the principled shader back here, and I can Control Shift and select the principled shader to preview it. And then you can also change the roughness if you want to, but I'm actually going to leave the roughness at 0.5. However, I am going to be using the clear coat, so let's open up the clear coat right here, and on the clear coat weight, I can turn this all the way up to 1, so now you can see it looks really shiny there on the surface, and it looks like there's kind of a clear coat or a glaze which has been painted over the ceramic. And then here on the roughness, I'm going to turn this up to a 0.1. Now I want to add that very subtle noise, so I'm going to go to the add menu and I'm going to search for a noise texture, drop it here, and then because we enabled the Node Wrangler, you can select the noise texture and press Ctrl T, and that's going to add the texture coordinate and mapping. Now I want to put the object into the vector of the noise texture because the object coordinates will place the noise texture on the object more evenly. And then we can select the mapping node and delete it because we don't need it. So let's Control Shift and select the noise texture, and I can change the settings. So I'll turn the scale to like a 40, and I'll turn the detail up to 15, and I'll turn the roughness to 8.65 so it's even more detailed. So now we can put this factor into the normal, and that's going to add a little bit of surface bump. So I'll Control Shift and select the principled shader. Now there's some really weird shading issues, and that's because we need to convert the black and white data into normal data that the shader can use. So we're going to search for a bump node, and we're going to drop the bump node right there. And now this black and white factor value can go into the height value here. So the gray dot is going into the gray dot, and then that's converting it to a normal map. So the purple dot can go into the purple dot. So now you can see it looks really bumpy, but I want to make it very, very subtle. So I'm going to turn the bump strength to a 0.02 so it's very subtle. And then also if you wanted to, you could put the normal here into the normal of the clear coat. And that way, if I turn this up and make it stronger, you can see the clear coat is looking bumpy. I'm not going to do that, but you certainly could if you want to. So that's it for the material. So let's now join it together into a node group. So I'll click and drag to box select all the nodes. I'll press Ctrl G to join it together into a node group. I'll hit the tab key to go out of the node group, and I can click here and drag it out to make it bigger, and let's just bring it over here. And then I can copy the material name, and I can paste it here into the node group. So let's hit the tab key to go into the node group, and I'll hit the N key to open up the side panel. And here in the group sockets, I can double click on this to rename it, and I'll just rename it to shader because I like that better. So now we can add all the custom values here into the group input. So the first value that I want to add is the base color, so I'll put color B into the extra socket. Let's double click on this to rename it, and I'll rename it to base color. Then I want to add the roughness, so let's put the principled roughness there into the roughness of the group input. Then let's drag the group input down here next to the clear coat, and I can put the weight into the extra socket and the roughness into the extra socket. And then I'm going to double click on this to rename it, and I like to call it glaze, and then let's call this glaze roughness. Then let's drag the group input right back here, and I can plug some of the noise settings up. So I'll plug the scale into the extra socket, the detail into the extra socket, and the roughness into the extra socket. And then after all these, or before them in the name, I'm going to call this noise scale, and this I'm going to call noise detail, and also this here, I'll call that noise roughness, so we're not getting that confused with the roughness of the shader. And then finally, the last one is that bump value, so the bump strength. So we'll put the strength into the extra socket, and I can click on this to rename it, and I'll call it bump strength. Alright, so I'll hit the N key to close the side panel, and I can hit the Tab key to go out of the node group. And let's just review the material to make sure it's working. So we have the base color, then we have the roughness, we also have that glaze and the glaze roughness. And then let's turn up the bump strength. We have the noise scale, the detail, the roughness, and then also that bump strength. And if you want to reset a value back to the default, you can hover your mouse over the value and then hit the backspace, and that's going to reset it to its default value. So let's select the next object here. Let's click on new to add a new material. And this one I'll rename to Speckled Ceramic. So let's go to the add menu, and I'm going to start by searching for a Voronoi texture. Let's Control Shift and select the Voronoi to preview it. And you can see it's stretching a little bit. So to fix this, I'm going to select the Voronoi and press Control T. That's using the feature of the Node Wrangler add-on. And we can plug the object into the vector, and you can see the object coordinates. It's going to place the Voronoi on the object more evenly, so it doesn't look stretched now. So let's change some of the settings of the Voronoi. So I'm going to turn this scale here to an 87, and I'll turn the detail up a little bit to like a 3, and I'll leave the other settings how they are. Now I want to make it more contrasty. So to make it more contrasty, I can add a color ramp, and we'll put the color ramp here after the Voronoi. And then I can drag the white tab together and drag the black tab over here. And I'm going to drag the white tab over here, and then I'll just put the black tab kind of over here. So it's black with little white speckles. So that's exactly what I want. So then I'm going to click and drag to box select both of these nodes, and I'll press Control Shift D. So Control Shift D will duplicate the nodes, but it'll keep the wires plugged up. And I'll just put them underneath these nodes. And I'll Control Shift and select the color ramp. So now for this one, I just want to change the Voronoi settings a little bit so we have more speckles. So for this one, I'll turn the detail to 15, and I'll turn the scale down to like a 40. So now you can see we have two different textures there for the speckles, and I want to join them together. So if you select both color ramps, you can press Control 0, and Control 0 is going to add this mix color, and let's just drag it over here. And on the mix type here, I want to change the type to lighten because we just want to add the light values. And then on the factor here, we can turn this all the way up to 1. So now you can see it's mixing both of these two textures together, and it's just adding the light values. So this is going to be it for the speckles, so I'll just drag these nodes up here. And if you want to, you can box select the nodes and press Control J to add a frame. And if you select the frame and press F2 to add a label, I'll just rename that to speckles. So now I want to create some worn edges, which are similar to the first material that we made. So I'm going to go to the add menu, and I'm going to search for the geometry node, and we'll put this right here. And then we can either Control Shift and select it to select the pointiness, or we can just plug the surface here into the pointiness so that we can preview that. So then I want to make it more contrasty, so I'm going to search for a color ramp. I'll put the color ramp here after the geometry, and I can drag the black tab over and drag the white tab over, and I'm going to put the white tab kind of to about here, and then the black tab, I'll put that kind of to about there. And again, if you are using Blender Eevee, then the pointiness value doesn't work. So in Blender Eevee, you could search for the ambient occlusion node instead, and if you plug the ambient occlusion up to the color, you can see you can get kind of a similar effect, but you'll just need to kind of play around with the color ramp to kind of change the values. So you can get a similar effect with the ambient occlusion if you're using Blender Eevee. Now I want to create the custom colors. So to make the custom colors, we can search for a mix color and drop this here, and the color ramp color can go into the factor. So now here on color A, this is going to be kind of like a brown color. And then for color B, this is going to be a light color, and I'll make it very slightly yellow. And if you want to use the same exact colors that I'm using, you can punch in the same hex codes. So here on color A, the hex value is going to be 4C, 3211C, and color B is going to be a hex value of E5, E3, D9. So we can box select these nodes, press Ctrl J to add a frame. You can select the frame and press F2 to add a label, and I'll just rename this to Worn Edges. So now I want to mix together the worn edges and the speckles. So what I'm going to do is go to the add menu and I'll search for a mix color. We're just going to put the mix color here, and then I can take this mix result here from the worn edges. We'll put that into color A, and then the speckles, this is going to go into the factor. So that's determining what is going to be color A and what is going to be color B. So if I Control Shift and select the mix now color B, this is going to be the color for the speckles. So you can see we're basically adding the speckles on top of the worn edges. And if you want to use the same color I'm using for the speckles, color B is going to be a hex value of 332113. So we can now plug the mix result into the base color, and I can Control Shift and select the principled shader to preview it. And then on the roughness here, I'll turn this down to like a 0.2 so it's pretty shiny. And then I do want to add that glaze, so we'll open up the coat here, and on the coat weight I can turn this all the way up to 1, and then this roughness here I'll turn to like a 0.2 so it is a little bit more rough. So now I just want to add a little bit of bump over the surface, so we're going to search for a noise texture, drop this down here, and I can take the same texture coordinate and mapping, we'll plug the vector into the vector of the noise texture, and I can Control Shift and select the noise texture to preview it, and let's change some of the settings. So I'll turn the scale to 16, and I'll turn the detail to 15, and then this roughness I can turn to like a 0.7, so we have a nice detailed noise texture. So now what we can do is search for a bump, and we'll put the bump here after the noise texture, and to convert it to bump data, the factor needs to be going into the height value. So now this bump normal can go into the normal of the principled shader, and I can Control Shift and select it to preview it. But then it's way too strong, so here on the bump strength, I'll turn this way down to like a 0.05. So that's it for the procedural material. So to join it into a node group, we're going to click and drag to box select all the nodes, and I'll press Ctrl G to join it together into a node group. I'll hit Tab to go out of the node group. We can drag the node group over here, and I can copy the material name, and I can paste it here into the node group, and let's just drag this out to make it a bit bigger. And then if I hit Tab to go into the node group, I'll hit the N key to open up the side panel, and I can double click on the BSDF to rename it, and I'll just rename it to shader because I like that better. So the first value that I want to plug into the group input here is the scale to control the size of the entire material. So this mapping node is plugged up to all the textures. So what we can do is take the mapping scale and put that into this socket here. And then instead of it being 3 values, I want it to be 1 value instead. So if you click on the scale here and change the type to float instead, that's going to make it 1 value. And then on the default value, we'll turn that to 1. Let's hit Tab to go out of the node group, and I can turn the scale back to 1. So now that'll change the size of the entire material. So let's go back into the node group. So the next values that I want to control are the speckle scale. So we'll take this Voronoi scale and this Voronoi scale, and we'll put them both into the extra sockets here. And then this one I'll rename to Speckled Scale 1. And then this one here, I'll rename to Speckled Scale 2. Then I want to add the custom colors. So we'll just drag this right down here. And I first want to add this white color because this is the ceramic, the main color. So I'll put that into the extra socket, and I'll just rename this to ceramic color. Then we'll take this brown color, which is color A, into the extra socket. And this one I'll rename to worn color. And then we can take this mixed color here, which is the speckled. We'll put that into the extra socket. And then this one I'll rename to speckles color. And then if the group input got put into the frame, you can select it and press Alt P to bring it out of the frame. Then I want to control the speckled visibility. So to do this, we need to add a new node. So we're going to search for a hue saturation value node, and we're going to put this here after the speckles group, but before the mix. So stick it there. Now this hue saturation value here has a value, and that's going to make it lighter or darker. So this value can be used to make it more visible or less visible. So we'll put the value into the extra socket here, double click on this to rename it, and I'll rename this to Speckles Visibility. So now I want to control the glaze. So I'll drag this down here, and actually I do also want to control the roughness. So let's take the roughness here, and I can drag it here into the extra socket. And then if I click on the roughness here, I can drag it up, and maybe I'll just put it right here underneath the speckles scale 2. But we can now take the coat weight, put that into the extra socket, and the roughness, put that into the extra socket. And I can rename this to glaze, and then I'm going to rename the coat roughness to glaze roughness. And then let's also control the bump strength. So I'll drag the input down here, and actually let's take the noise scale and put that into the extra socket, and I can double click on this, and I'll just rename it to like noise scale. And then we can also take the bump strength, put that into the extra socket, and then I can rename this one to bump strength. Alright, I'll drag the river input back up here. I'll hit the N key to close the side panel, and I'll hit Tab to go out of the node group. And we can now review the final material. So we have the scale of the material. We also have speckle scale 1 and speckle scale 2. Then we have the roughness. And then we have the main color, the ceramic. Then we have that worn color. And then we also have the speckles color. We also have the speckles visibility, and then the glaze and the glaze roughness, and then the noise bump strength, and also the noise scale. So let's do the last material. So I'm going to select the base here. Let's click on new to add a new material. In this material, I'm going to be calling it textured ceramic because it has kind of the most detailed texture. So let's start by adding a noise texture. We'll drop this up here, and I'll Control Shift and select the noise texture to preview it. And with the noise texture selected, I'll press Control T to add the texture coordinate and mapping. And we'll put the object into the vector, so it's using the object coordinates. And I can drag these back here. We can now change the noise settings. So I'm going to turn the scale to 100, so it's really big. I'll also turn the detail up to 10, so it's pretty detailed. And then the roughness here, I'll turn to like a 0.7. And then I want to add kind of a little bit of dots. So we're going to turn the lacularity value to 4. So now you can see it looks like there's some little dots or some speckles. So now to make this more contrasty, I'm going to search for a color ramp. We'll put it here after the noise. And I can drag the black tab over and drag the white tab over. And I'm going to drag this to about there, and maybe the white tab to about there. So we have that cool texture. So now underneath these textures, I'm going to add a wave texture and a noise texture to add some more cool textures. So we're going to search for a wave texture, drop this here, and then also we'll search for a noise texture, drop this down here. And then we want to use the same vector here, so we'll put this into the wave texture and the vector into the vector of the noise. So let's Control Shift and select the wave texture, and I'll change the settings. So on the type here, on the X type, I'm going to change this to Z instead, so it's going back and forth. And I can turn the scale to a 4.8. I'll turn the distortion up to 18, so it's pretty distorted. And I can turn the detail to the max of 15. And then the detail roughness, I'll turn to like a 0.55. Let's Control Shift and select the noise texture now. And for this one, I want to turn the scale to a 28. I'll also turn the detail to 15, so it's very detailed. And then I'll leave the other settings how they are. So now what I want to do is mix the wave and the noise together. So if I hold down the Shift key and select both of them, I can press Control 0, and that is going to add this mix color right here. And this one can go into color A, and the noise can go into color B. Now I want to mix them both together, but I want to have the noise kind of distort the wave. So on the mix type here, I'm going to change this to linear light. Now if I turn up the factor, you can see if I turn the factor to 0, it's just the wave. But then as I turn up the factor, the noise is distorting the wave. So you can still see the waves, but it looks much more noisy. Now I want to make the custom colors. So to do this, we're going to search for another mix color. Let's drop this here after the linear light, and the result can go into the factor. So now, because this is going to the factor, it's determining what parts are going to be color A and what parts are going to be color B. So for color A, I'm going to make this kind of like an aqua greenish bluish color. And if you want to use the same color I'm using, the hex value is 274A3C. And then for color B, this is going to be kind of just like a greenish color, a dark green. And the hex value will be 254524. So now I want to mix together this color here and then also this texture here. So we'll duplicate the mix and drop it here, and the mix result, this can go into color A, and then this color up here, this can go into the factor to determine what parts will be color A and what parts will be color B. So now if I Control Shift and select the mix, color B here, this can be kind of like a brownish color to add those subtle dots. And the hex value for this color is going to be 332313. So the mix result can go into the base color, and I can Control Shift and select the principled shader to preview it. Let's also turn the roughness down to like a 0.23 so it's more shiny. We can also open up the coat here to add that glaze, and I'll turn the coat weight all the way up to 1. And then this roughness here, I'll just turn that to like a 0.1 so it's a little bit more rough, but it's still pretty shiny. So now I just want to add some normal to give it a little bit of surface bump. So let's search for a bump node. I will drop this down here. And if I Control Shift and select this linear light, this is going to be that wave texture. So I'll put the result into the height value, and then the bump normal can go into the normal of the shader, and I'll Control Shift and select it to preview it. Now you can see it's really bumpy, so I want to turn the strength value down to a 0.03 so it's more subtle. Then I can duplicate the bump node and drop it here after the first one. And I want to take this color up here, which is that noise texture, but it's more contrasty. And I'll put the color into the height value. So that's adding just a little bit more subtle bump. That's it for the procedural material. So to join it together into a node group, I'll click and drag to box select all the nodes here. I'll press Ctrl G to join it together into a node group. I'll hit the tab key to go out of the node group, and we can drag the node group over here. Let's make it bigger. And I can copy the material name and I can paste it here into the node group. Now if I hit tab to go into the node group, I'll hit the N key to open the side panel, and I'll double click on the group socket here, and I'll rename that to shader because I like that better. So now right over here on the group input, we can plug up all the custom values. So we'll first take the mapping scale, put that into the extra socket. Let's click on the scale and we'll change the type from vector to float. So it is one value. We'll turn the default value to 1. We'll go out of the node group and I can turn the scale back to 1. Let's go back into the node group. Then I want to add the roughness, so I'll just drag the group input over here and I can put the roughness into the extra socket. And then I want to control the colors, so I'll drag this down here and I can put color A into the extra socket, color B into the extra socket, and then also this here, this color B into the extra socket. Now I'll rename all these, so this one is color 1, this one I'll rename to color 2, and this one I'll rename to color 3. Then I want to add the glaze, so we'll drag this down here, and we can take the coat weight, put that into the extra socket, and the roughness, put that into the extra socket, and I'll just rename this to glaze, and then this one here I'll rename to glaze roughness. And then I want to add the bump strengths. And for this one, if I zoom in here, you can see this bump strength and this bump strength, the same exact value. So I'm going to put this strength into this socket, and then this bump strength, I'm going to put that into the same exact socket. And that way, this strength value will control both of them at once. And I'll double click on this to rename it, and I'll rename it to bump strength. We can now hit the N key to close the side panel. We can drag the group input back over here, and I'll hit the tab key to go outside the node group. And we can now review the finished material. So we have the scale of the material, then we have the roughness, and then we have all the different custom colors. So color 1, we also have color 2, and then we also have color 3. Then we have the glaze and the glaze roughness, and then finally the bump strength. So that is it. That is how you create these 3 different procedural ceramic materials. And if you'd like to help support the channel and purchase these materials, you can get them on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. You can also check out my Ultimate Blender Procedural Material Pack, which comes with all of my materials, pre-set up for Blender's asset browser, with custom thumbnails, sorted catalogs, and customizable node groups. And every time I create 10 more procedural materials, I update the material pack with all the new materials. So in the next update, when I update the material pack, I'll add these materials to my Ultimate Material Pack, making it really easy to just drag and drop the materials from the asset browser into your projects. And you can check out my Blender procedural material tutorial playlist to learn how to create more materials. But I hope you found this helpful, and thank you for watching.